The Mac is Apple's most important product, yet they seem to always neglect it. And I'll explain why I think it's the most important product in a minute. But before, if you haven't subscribed to the Techno Eclipse podcast, go to the link down below and hit subscribe. If you want to support the channel on Patreon, it's so easy. You get some perks along with it, like the podcast episodes a week early, and you also get to see a secret hidden behind the scenes type video once a month that will also be posted on the Patreon, with more perks coming soon. Also, don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. So let's talk about why the Mac is Apple's most important device that they sell, yet it's the one that they seem to neglect the most as well. So let's look at the Apple lineup right now. It's not really divided, it's pretty simple. They have Macs, iPads, Apple Watches, and phones. Everything else is just minor, like AirPods and anything else, the HomePod, anything else they sell isn't really a main key thing. I would say it's those few four categories that really make up Apple's whole lineup of products, I'd say. But out of all those products, most people would probably say that the iPhone is the most important. And while I would normally agree with you on that, I began to think about it a little bit. And I thought, well, no, the iPhone would be nothing without the Mac. The Mac by itself is the most important device. So let's take a look at all the products. The iPhone is nothing without the Mac, the iPad is nothing without the Mac, and the Apple Watch is also nothing without the Mac. And why do I say that? What makes a device good? Is it just the build quality and the CPU power and the GPU power and then what type of screen is on it? No. The thing that makes a device good and the thing that makes the device one of the best devices of all time in terms of the iPhone and the best tablet of all time in terms of the iPad is the fact that you can run apps on it that are super useful. So let's look at it. What apps do you use on your phone? Personally, I don't use too many apps, but I do use like the YouTube Studio app. I do use YouTube an awful lot. I use Gmail. I sometimes go on Twitter and Instagram, along with iMessage and texting my girlfriend and occasionally Snapchat. So if I didn't have those apps, I couldn't use my phone, right? My phone would be pretty much rendered useless. Same thing with the iPad. When I use Hulu on the iPad or Netflix, or I use any other sort of combination of those apps, it wouldn't make sense to even have an iPad if there were no apps available. So if you understand what I'm getting at, it's the reason the Mac is so important is because it literally is the only way to make an iPhone, iPad, or Apple Watch app. What I'm referring to is Xcode. Xcode is Apple's coding software. It's the only software you can use to make apps for the iPhone. And without Xcode, you cannot make apps for the iPhone. So Facebook, when they make an app for the iPhone, it has to be built in Xcode. Facebook has to have a bunch of Macs at their disposal because they are an app company while they sell ads. If Apple were to one day just say, you know what, Facebook, we like what you do, but we're going to block all access to your app and to your website on our phones, Facebook would be in pretty rough shape, as would probably Apple, because people buy phones, and if they can't get Facebook on it, maybe most people probably wouldn't buy that phone. I wouldn't really care because I don't really ever use Facebook, although I do use it for Facebook Marketplace, so actually I'll take that back. I would be a little bit upset. But without the Mac, the iPhone wouldn't really even exist. There would be no app market. When you are looking at a device, the most important thing is not the specs. It's not how powerful it is. It's not how many RAMs it has. The most important thing when looking at any type of computer, whether it's an iPhone, iPad, Mac, PC, Android phone, whatever you want, the most important thing is the UX, the user experience. Not even necessarily the interface, it's just the experience. Is this product good because of the experience? That's what Apple has been winning on for years. They sometimes give you less than what your money should actually be buying. I'm talking in terms of a Mac when you compare it to a PC, but then when you look at the actual user experience, macOS is, in my opinion, way better than Windows, and again, in my opinion, iOS is better than Android. Obviously, people have their differing opinions, but in my opinion, Apple has the best user experience, although there are some things that I just can't get when running a Mac computer because I just need a little bit more power. So that's why the Mac is the most important device. And the company was built on the Mac. Apple was built on the Mac. The first thing that they ever came out with, the first device, was the Mac. The Mac will be around maybe longer than the iPhone. I would surmise that possibly longer than the iPhone, or maybe even the iPad. Maybe not. but I would be interested to see that. More than likely it won't be. But computers, in my opinion, are something that is so incredibly important to society that like a desktop computer won't die. Home computers, they're probably already dead, or they're at least dying, they're out the door. But just in general, computers for people who are creatives, who run their businesses, it's tough to run a business off a phone. My father runs his business pretty much off of his phone. He has a computer, but he runs his business off of his phone because he's selling, he's talking to customers, he's talking to clients, he's talking with distributors, he's talking with suppliers, he's talking with all these people, and he needs his phone for that. But it's interesting, without that phone, none of the apps could have been developed for that phone without the Mac. So what do you guys think? Is the Mac really the most important? Technically, no. All of Apple's revenue essentially comes from the iPhone. It's whether it's the iPhone sales or buying products to support the iPhone, whether it's AirPods, the HomePod, even the iPad. You could even say the Mac supports the iPhone. However, and I've said this in the past, everything supports the iPhone. However, without the Mac, the iPhone wouldn't exist. It couldn't exist. There would be no operating system. There would be no app support. There would be no software. There just wouldn't be anything because Apple puts all of their weight on the Mac. Which really brings me to ask this question. Why does Apple treat Mac users so poorly? They seem to be reluctant to upgrade even their most basic machines like an iMac, one of the computers that Apple built their company on. I have a poster right there. And I think it's really interesting that Apple is super neglectant, and it almost seems like they don't care about the Mac, when in fact, without the Mac, their entire company, what makes their company so great, the user experience would kind of fail. I'm curious to see what Apple does in the future because, as we know, we've been waiting on an iMac update. They just updated the Mac Mini, but the Mac Pro, even the iMac Pro hasn't been updated. What's so hard with yearly updates to your computers, Apple? Is that really too much to ask? But that's it. That's all I have. That's why I think the Mac is the most important product that Apple sells. What do you think? Is it really? The iPhone's important, but in my opinion, I like the Mac better, so it's the Mac. No, but the Mac is more important, although without the Mac, Apple would probably just allow users to build apps on their PCs, although I wonder if that would make the experience on iOS worse because it's not locked in. It's like, well, you have to adhere to these strict guidelines. If app developers were able to make their apps on Windows, I wonder if it would not really mesh as well as it does and be integrated and really be supported. And then when you just look at an iOS app versus an Android app, the optimization is much better on iOS. So what do you guys think? That's the third time I think I've asked that. I'm really curious, obviously. But if you guys like the video, hit subscribe, hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. It will be linked down below. The next episode comes out on Wednesday at noon. Also, if you want to get that episode early, go pay me money on Patreon. But if you don't, that's fine. You watching the video is plenty of support for me. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.